We've all been there. You're staring at a printer that refuses to connect, suddenly feeling certain that the machine is actively, maliciously ignoring you. Or maybe you find yourself saying please and thank you to a chatbot, feeling a twinge of genuine guilt if you close the window too abruptly. This projection of human emotions and motivations onto non-human entities is called anthropomorphism. While early philosophers dismissed this as a crude intellectual error, modern cognitive science recognizes it as a deeply ingrained evolutionary adaptation. Anthropomorphism is an inductive process. Because the human mind possesses a rich, accessible model of human behavior, it uses that knowledge as a default template to interpret unfamiliar or complex environments. This creates a severe mismatch in the modern era. We are utilizing ancient, Paleolithic agency-detecting hardware to navigate a hyper-complex digital landscape. Without a clear awareness of these cognitive blind spots, we allow aesthetic biases to mismanage the planet's ecosystems and leave ourselves uniquely vulnerable to psychological manipulation by our own technology. To understand precisely why our brains do this, evolutionary psychologists point to a concept called the hyperactive agency detection device. Imagine an early human walking across the ancient savanna. Out of the corner of their eye, they notice a bush suddenly rustling. They must decide in a split second if the movement is just wind or a hidden predator. This graph illustrates the survival math of that moment. The cost of a false positive, running away from a breeze, is a few burned calories, but the cost of a false negative, dismissing a hidden predator as the wind, is fatal. Natural selection heavily favored the anxious. The brain evolved a highly sensitive heuristic to over-detect intention, projecting agency onto natural forces to ensure nothing dangerous slipped by unnoticed. To stay alive, humanity became a species that constantly misfires, reflexively detecting conscious minds in the shadows, where only artifice or accident exists. While survival explains the origins, modern psychology reveals that anthropomorphism is often a deliberate cognitive strategy. According to the Seek model, our brains actively construct these human-like minds, based entirely on our own internal psychological states. The first major trigger is affectance motivation, our need to control unpredictable environments. When things behave erratically, our brains use the human model to fill in the explanatory gaps and organize the chaos. We are also driven by sociality motivation. When we feel isolated or lonely, our brains actively invent social connections in our environment to satisfy our fundamental need for connection. Finally, our minds look for elicited agent knowledge. If an object has two dots for eyes, it activates our internal human template, locking our perception of an agent into place. It operates as a psychological mirror, reflecting our need for control, our desire for connection, and a sense of familiarity. This psychological mirroring has profound impacts on global biodiversity. Consider the Bambi effect. Public sympathy is massively skewed toward animals that possess human-relatable traits, like forward-facing eyes and audible vocalizations of distress. Because these traits easily trigger our agent-detecting hardware, we overinvest empathy in them. This selective sentimentality creates a severe taxonomic bias in international conservation funding and scientific research. This chart shows the distribution of European Union conservation funding. While vertebrates like birds and mammals make up less than 2% of global species richness, they receive 75% of the total budget, leaving critical invertebrate ecosystems understudied and unprotected. Historically, scientists made the opposite error. In a hyper-skeptical pushback known as anthropodenial, researchers often refuse to recognize complex consciousness in animals simply because their behavior didn't look human enough. By allowing a flawed psychological heuristic to dictate ecological policy, we protect the planet based on aesthetic cuteness rather than objective biological survival. This danger is even more acute on the digital frontier. In human-computer interaction, there is a phenomenon called the ELIZA effect, where we subconsciously assume software has emotional depth simply because it can match text patterns and mimic conversation. Modern generative AI is engineered to activate our agent-detecting hardware through first-person pronouns and affective expressions. These interactional cues create a potent illusion of empathy and intelligence, prompting us to treat software as a social actor. This dynamic exploits a confidence heuristic. When an AI responds with a confident, human-like tone, we implicitly assume it possesses human-level expertise, causing our epistemic vigilance to drop. This erosion of critical scrutiny is why drivers cede safety responsibilities to autopilots they perceive as intelligent, or why users reveal sensitive data to chatbots that successfully mimic a trusting human relationship. To counter this psychological exploitation, global regulatory bodies are stepping in. The European Union Artificial Intelligence Act is the world's first comprehensive legal framework aimed at governing AI deployment. Specifically, Article 50 of the Act targets the anthropomorphic illusion directly. It legally mandates transparency, forcing these systems to explicitly disclose their synthetic nature to users to help maintain their critical cognitive guardrails. Navigating the future requires the application of critical anthropomorphism. We have to consciously override our evolutionary hardwiring, drawing a firm, objective intellectual line between the illusion of a mind and the reality of a machine.